Welcome back. You're listening to the Innovation in Government Show, sponsored by Carahsoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Laura Grant, the head of digital innovation for public sector at SAP, and David Vernon, a senior human capital management application specialist, also at SAP. Before break, we were talking a lot about the IT modernization trends and the need to really change business processes. Let's shift a little bit. And David, let me start with you. The workforce is the key piece to this. There was a recent CIO survey that came out, and every part of that CIO survey talked about workforce. So, David, you're the workforce expert on our panel today. Talk a little bit about what's happening, what's different today, beyond the fact that we're all getting older.
I'm not.
No.
You may be. Okay.
Well, you're the lucky one.
Right.
You and Peter Pan.
That's right. Okay. When we talk in the federal space and actually industry in general, we've seen a lot of change. Of course, I've seen a lot of change. The aging workforce is an issue. We had a recent GAO report, I think it was in the past year or two, that indicated that 34% of the federal workforce, total federal workforce, are eligible to retire by the year 2020. Now, when you think of that, and you're thinking of just the federal workforce, that's an enormous amount of people that you're going to have to recruit, you're going to have to train, you're going to have to hire them and get them onboarded, that type of thing. So that's a big undertaking. Now, granted, not everybody's going to retire at the same time, but it is something to start planning for and looking at. We've also seen a move away from men in the workplace, not just men in the workplace. We have more women and more minorities sharing space in the workplace than ever before. So, and everybody works differently, so they have to adapt to those changes in the workforce. We also have generational differences. We mentioned earlier that there's 5 generations in the workforce now for the first time ever. Each one of them works differently. So the federal government needs to have systems in place that supports how the generational work habits are different.
I think that's a great point about the 5 generations in the workplace, because one of the things you've seen is this push for, and this goes back to maybe what Laura was talking about, the online help, whether it's, hey, I have a question about my veterans benefits, I can do a chat or chat bot, but they also have, remember the old Pueblo, Colorado call for information, and GSA has been very good about not getting rid of their phone numbers, knowing that people work differently. How do agencies keep that in mind as they're planning to improve their services? Let me start with David on the HR side, then Laura, you jump in.
We see agencies looking towards employee service centers, knowledge bases where you can go in and search for, maybe it's questions or events about benefits that have occurred, so they have a knowledge base and they can go and search and answer the question themselves. But they also have the service center that you can reach out and touch somebody and they can help you that way as well. So we see them looking to move into that area more.
And Laura, from your perspective, when you start talking about the modernization piece and business process change, that also has to play into this workforce / improvement to serve the citizen better, because there's multiple generations out there to serve the citizen.
Correct. And it's the same thing. It's, how do you provide services via a portal or via an application or an app on a phone that really meets the needs of the citizen? A citizen shouldn't have to understand your organization and how it's structured to navigate your portal. Same thing with an application. The application should push that information forward to them and make it easier to consume. So really leveraging, mobility and the cloud and these portals, and as well as keeping some of these call centers around so that we meet the needs for each of these different aged citizens that are out there as well.
You reminded me of something. The citizen shouldn't have to understand how the government's organized. And back in the Bush administration time, they talked about 3 clicks to service, and that really begun this conversation of citizen services. And the progress has been slow, and I think part of that reason is we could blame money, you could blame technology, but again, it's the people, it's the understanding. So David, again, as our HR specialist on this one, is there a training issue here too that has to play into getting the workforce to move in a specific direction?
To get the workforce to move, I would say yes. But the way the technology is today, it's more intuitive. So you don't have to have a lot of training in order to get into a system and do certain items. Um, I can give you an example off the wall, which is kind of like the recruiting processes in the federal government. We talk to a lot of agencies and we talk to a lot of applicants, and they feel that the recruiting processes in the federal government right now are like archaic. They're too many clicks. You have to do too many clicks in order to even to apply. There's no connection to the social network. There's no feedback, no timely feedback. So you can put in your resume to apply for a job and you may not hear anything back. And then there's an extended time in order to hire that individual. And I can give you from my own experience because I used to work for the government. And I put in my resume and I did not hear anything back for 9 months. So it took 9 months for them to make me an offer and to get me onboarded. So they need to actually fix that process. And we've seen this in the papers recently. They are looking at fixing that process. It's faster in the commercial world where I could actually make an interview and make an offer to a person sitting here right now and have them start today if I wanted to. That won't occur in today's federal world.
Laura, jump in.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is so critical in the reasoning why this needs to get fixed is it's a competitive workforce. It's a competitive marketplace out there right now. Young talent coming into the government. We have this need for programmers. We have a need for data scientists. We have a need for analysts. And they don't want to work on old technology. They constantly want to work with the newer technology. They want to work in iOS, JavaScript, Python, those types of technologies. They don't want to work in COBOL. So in order to capture this workforce that wants to work for the government because they want to support the mission, they want purpose-driven work. We have to make that hiring and the application process better, because otherwise you're going to lose. They're going to take the job that gets offered to them, and if the government is taking 9 months to offer a position, they're going to lose the talent, and we can't afford that.
And I think that's being recognized in the government, though it's been recognized, I think, for the last 15 years,
Right.
that the hiring process is broken or at least needs to be severely improved. The CIO Council is having a hiring fair in early November where they're kind of pre-qualifying people through the resume process and then getting those interviews and potentially doing some spot hiring. So it's good to see some innovation, if you will, even though a hiring fair is not necessarily innovation, but some movement in that direction. Laura, what's the technology side of this equation? Like you mentioned earlier about machine learning and resumes and machine learning and dealing with applicants. Are there other technology side to help the workforce, whether it's recruiting or training?
So I think the thing that the CIO councils and they're talking this language, it's really about doing innovation on the edge. So you're going to modernize your back end systems, your HR systems, your supply chains, your finance systems, but you need to also have an innovation platform that's going to allow you to do this innovation on the edge. It's going to really allow you to bring in the machine learning, bring in blockchain, bring in artificial intelligence, and allow that to be a part of the overall innovation and modernization process. But it's this continuous innovation that these innovation platforms need to provide, because I can't tell you what's going to come out next year in technology, right? It's changing so fast. It's very exciting.
But if you could, we could all be rich.
I know.
So why
That's
can't
right.
you?
I will try.
Okay. But you're
That
right.
question was asked of me by a CIO once.
What's coming next?
Yeah. What do you predict in the next 10 years?
Well, what did you say?
I said, I can't predict tomorrow.
Fair enough. It's hard. I mean, it's one of those things that, did we ever think when the iPhone came out what that would do to the way we work? And now what's next? I mean, cloud. I remember years ago they talked about something called grid computing, and I had no clue what that meant, and it was really just an early form of cloud. David, talk a little bit about the other trends that are kind of looking into the future. As if we have this conversation a year from now, what are some of those other trends that you think are going to start to take hold around HR?
Well, I know one of the areas that's really big in the federal government is they want a better, newer, more modern user experience when employees log into the system. So we see that that's already here, and we can do that now. So it has to be friendly, it has to be flexible, and it has to be so that you don't have to have a lot of training for the individuals, so that they can log in and get to things without having to go to a lot of training. We see also a push of increased interest, I guess would be better, for employee engagement. It used to be when I worked for the federal government, I had a job, I did my job, and I went home, basically. Now you want those employees to be engaged. And you engage them because, especially like a new hire, you engage those employees because you want to get them involved in the organization, up to speed and productive as quickly as possible. That's good because it helps the employee feel that they're contributing to the organization and that they're being heard within the organization. And we cannot discount the value of an employee feeling that they are contributing to an organization and they're being heard, because when they feel that way, they stay. And when they stay, that does nothing but improve the retention for the agency.
And it also leads them down the path of that modernization piece, because they start looking at business processes because they're engaged, they understand it, and they go, hey, what if we did it this way? And someone goes, oh, we never thought of that. Lars, we're almost out of time. So similar question. What's the takeaway from our conversation, but also where are we going? What's the big trends?
So I think that the trends are what we had talked about, right? Bringing in machine learning, blockchain, chatbots into the enterprise, into these back-end systems. But the enabling technology is mobility and cloud, right? Because the government is starting to embrace the cloud. We're seeing the mandate coming down from Defense Secretary Mattis, and making it clear that Department of Defense needs to take aggressive steps toward embracing kind of commercial cloud technologies. And they're creating a DoD cloud steering committee. A year ago, even 6 months ago, I would have said DoD is probably not going to go into the cloud. But now things are changing because the technology, it's secure, it's safe, it's proven. They realize this is the way they're going to have to do things to keep the budgets under control and to continue to innovate. And then I think the mobile technology with the new workforce is really another driver in this. That's really kind of shifting this move to rethink business processes and modernize all of the systems.
All right, this has been a fascinating conversation. There's a ton that you left us to think about, especially chatbots and Alexa for government employees. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank my guests. Laura Grant, the head of digital innovation for public sector at SAP, and David Vernon, a senior human capital management application specialist, also at SAP. Laura, David, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search innovation.